The BBC have put out a statement today about the Fujitsu Horizon scandal. And the real problem is I know there's a big campaign and a big effort to get people to sign a statement saying that we want Fujitsu to foot the bill for the Horizon scandal. I'm not sure that's entirely appropriate, and I'll tell you why. And it's very simple. Fujitsu was simply doing what they thought they should be doing. I don't think they were doing it rightly. I don't think they were doing it correctly. I think they were making a pig's ear of the job, but they were nevertheless doing something that they felt was correct. The same cannot be said for the post office. No. We know that the post office commissioned an investigation, and we know, because I reported this the other day, in 2003, there was an individual who said that the Fujitsu system was unsafe, and he was suppressed. Now, it turns out there was a report by Ernst and Young in 2011 that warned that Fujitsu had access to a sort of backdoor and could manipulate data, that it had unrestricted access. So, when the BBC was preparing a panorama programme about the Horizon scandal, and they were basing a lot of their information on the whistleblower Richard Roll and his evidence that Fujitsu had the ability to fiddle around in the back room, to fiddle with figures in the back room, then 3 people turned up to put pressure on the BBC. These 3 people were Mark Davis, the PR man, supported later by Patrick Bourke, and by the network manager Angela van der Bogerd. Now, they all claimed that there was no way that that Fujitsu or the post office could manipulate figures. Van der Bogert said nobody could change the sub-postmaster's accounts without their knowledge. She said any alteration would leave a footprint, and that's the important bit. And it's 100% true. We can't change, alter, modify existing transaction data, so the integrity is 100% preserved. And that's true now and has been for the duration of the system. Yes, it is. But that's not true. That's not true. And Paula Vennells went on to congratulate particularly Mark Davis, the PR man, for his efforts to effectively deceive the BBC. Now, there's been an effort to row back and to say that Mark Davis, Patrick Bourke, and Angela van der Bogert did not know at that time that Fujitsu had access to this back door and were constantly manipulating the figures. They did not know, therefore they were able to say with all certainty. The same could be said for Paula Vennells. They did not know, except for this evidence that a report by Ernst and Young had already made it quite clear in 2011, and the fact that in 2003 it had already been flagged up. Those are the reports that we know about. There almost certainly are other reports and other investigations that we don't know about that the CEO of a large company like the Post Office must have known about. Either Paula Vennells is on top of her brief, she is competent, or she's lying. And if she's lying, you then get back to the issue that we've got in the case of Michel Mone. Is it okay to lie to the press? That's not perjury, is it? To lie to the press. That's just a lie. Well, the problem in this case is I think they have also lied to the courts. because in order to get those prosecutions, they withheld information, which is a lie. So all that will be needed to convict, I fear, some senior management in the post office is evidence about when this information was public. And it's either negligence or it's deceit. It's either negligence or perjury. Stupidity or bloody-mindedness. Jo Hamilton was also involved in the BBC investigation. She was the person who, if you remember in the ITV drama, was calling up the helpline, and the figures were changing before her eyes. And that's in her branch in Hampshire. And you know, when you see that humanity, when you see that reality, that's the human face of the lies which were being told and the efforts which were being made to preserve the reputation of Post Office Limited. That reputation is soiled beyond repair. Going back to the investigation, the investigation by the BBC didn't begin in 2015. It went back to 2014. And this obsession with no functionality to edit, manipulate, remove transactional data. We couldn't do it. Maybe there on a sort of playing with words thing. You could say, well, we couldn't do it, but Fujitsu could. Maybe that's an excuse that could be followed up. But I think the principle that these people were prosecuted and that the post office management knew that there was a way to manipulate the data, to access the data through Fujitsu. I don't think there's any solid ground for a defence, frankly. Under Paula Vennells, there was a campaign of misinformation, which is partly directed towards the press, but partly directed towards supporting these appalling convictions and ensuring that people of good character were sent to prison, had their families destroyed, had their livelihoods wrecked, and in some cases their mental health severely impaired to the point where some of them have killed themselves. These the senior management of the post office has blood on its hands. There must be criminal charges. But first, before we get to that point, there must be proper restitution. The money which was taken from these people must be paid back with interest. And then there must be compensation. And we shouldn't confuse those two ideas. And proper compensation, not just to the people who were directly affected, but to their families who were indirectly affected and had to support them during this horrific time. Then we need to think about what to do with the post office. I think it needs to be closed in its current form. Absolutely. It needs to be wound down, destroyed. New logo, whatever else it takes. But there then needs to be a post office in every town, in every village. It needs to be at the hub of the community. And we need to rethink how that is supported by the government directly. None of this nonsense about a fantasy private firm that the government is the sole shareholder of. None of that fantasy. And that needs to be something that civil servants are working up now. And if they're not doing that, then they are themselves failing in their job. These contingencies need to be on paper now. And it's this failure to think ahead and this failure to be responsible that produced the Horizon scandal in the first place.